Why should I join your Facebook group? Why should I join your 21-day challenge? Why should I join your email list? That's always an interesting one for me because you go on a website and they say, join my newsletter so you never miss anything. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all of the time. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode number 108, a lesson from the music industry. We talked about how exposure is an opportunity, not necessarily a conversion. I've been talking about conversion a lot lately. 25-year-old Kev would never have guessed that this is what we would be talking about. Today, for episode number 109, why calls to action don't always work. So as I said in the previous episode, I've been doing a lot of podcast breakthrough sessions. And on these podcast breakthrough sessions, we're often talking about business. And I've had clients ask me this a lot recently too. And they're asking about calls to action. What call to action should I have? Where should I have it? Should it be recorded? Should it be a live read? Should it be in the outro? How do you want to do it? How should we do it? What's the best way to do it? And I think the answer is always, it depends. It depends and. It depends on this. It depends on this. But today I want to talk all about calls to action. I know we've talked about them in the past, but it's been a minute. I want to talk about a couple of mistakes that I see with calls to action and how to make our calls to action better. So number one, what is a call to action? A call to action is simply asking somebody to go somewhere else after they consume the content that they are consuming, or asking them to do a behavior while they're listening to the content. Call to action would be like, subscribe, comment, all that happy jazz. Or if you enjoyed today's episode, we have a Facebook group called Blank. Click the link in the show notes and it'll take you there. The call to action is just calling someone to take a new action. Simple enough, right? Why don't they work? You've heard me say this before. There are two types of calls to action. We have highest probability and we have highest return on investment. A highest return on investment call to action is, I guess, essentially collapsing time, where somebody listens to something or watches something or consumes something, and then they go all the way down to the bottom of your business. So let's say I listen to this podcast, or I do a podcast episode. At the end, I say, hey, if you need help with podcast production, whether it's audio editing, video editing, social media content, show notes, posting it everywhere, thumbnails, we got you. We actually have packages starting as little as $297 per month. If that's something that interests you, click the link below and it'll take you to our landing page, hypothetically. I expect that to convert very little, because if you're not interested in signing up, you're not even going to check it out. If you're not in the market, you're not going to check it out. If it's above your price range, you're not going to check it out. If you think it's too low so it can't be valuable, you're not going to check it out. There are too many hoops to jump through before you ever click on that link. Highest probability eventually will be the Facebook group. So, hey, if you found value in this episode and you want to surround yourself with other podcasts and podcasters who are focused on growth, I actually have a Facebook group called Podcast Growth Nation, and it's filled with amazing podcasters like yourself. Click the link in the show notes and it'll take you there. For every 10 people, or let's put it this way, for every one person that signs up for something paid, there's probably going to be 10 people that do the free thing. So that's one reason a lot of calls to action aren't working. On the other end, and this is interesting, I have some clients who their audience doesn't want the free thing. Their audience wants to do the paid thing. So when they do a free call to action on their podcast, nothing happens. But when they do a paid one, people come out of the woodwork. That's worth testing, but it's a very specific audience. So that depends. So highest probability versus highest ROI. I usually go with highest probability because that's what I've seen work the best. Okay, example of this. I used this example in the previous episode. When I spoke in Toronto, at the end of my speech, Actually, no, this wasn't in Toronto. I had the opportunity to do the speech again 2 weeks later, virtually to a group of 50 people. And it was an hour and a half instead of 45 minutes, so I refined it and all that happy jazz. At the end of that hour and a half presentation, I had a slide up with a QR code that said, hey, I will hop on a free 30-minute call with every single one of you. Anybody who is interested, I will hop on a free call and add value. Whatever that means to you. We can talk about podcasting, we can talk about speaking, you can ask me questions, and I'll do my best to add value. That's what it's going to be. That's the goal. And I think 10 people booked. 10 out of 50. Is that 20%? That's really good. I was very, very, very surprised. Well, why? Because it's highest probability. If I got to the end of that presentation and I said, hey, if anybody here is looking for a podcast coach, I do that and this is how much I charge, I don't think I would have got a single person. Because there's just not enough certainty yet. There's not enough value yet. There's not enough of a relationship yet. But then I did those 10 breakthrough sessions. And I think maybe 3 or 4 people ended up becoming clients. And it's just because we were talking behind the scenes. I was adding value. We really meshed. A lot of the stuff that I was talking about was helping them try to solve their problems. And a lot of their problems had to do with some of the stuff that we could solve. Cool. Right? Awesome. That's great. And all these humans are really amazing humans. Love that. Super excited about that. But that was based on the fact that I went with the highest probability call to action, not the highest ROI. It ended up being successful and it ended up paying off. And now that trip's all paid for, as I was talking about in the last episode. But that wasn't how I approached it. I do a lot of free stuff. I always want to do free stuff because my belief is I'm going to be able to talk to more people for free than I am for paid. Or I'm going to be able to talk to more people with a higher probability call to action than a higher ROI. I enjoy that. And I think it's a really good opportunity to add value and over-deliver. So that's a little piece of it. Live reads versus recorded. Okay. Where do I want to go with this? For a long time, one of our calls to action was a midtro in the middle of our podcast, and I still have one here at Podcast Growth U, I believe. It was a testimonial from a client. That was our midtro. It's not necessarily a call to action, but it's, hey, I worked with Kev and I worked with the team and they were awesome and this has been my experience. You can trust them if you want to work with them, right? That's kind of a call to action. It's just not a very strong one because it's not somebody saying, click the link in the show notes and all that happy jazz. I like mid-rolls, meaning in the middle of the podcast, because I think a call to action in the very beginning might get skipped if they're skipping your intro, and the call to action at the very end, like in your outro, might get skipped because a lot of people don't listen to the outro. So we have a midtro, and we got rid of it, but we did have a midtro. And we also do 2 calls to action at the end of every episode. Those calls to action are the highest probability usually. Usually the one I do is the highest probability. Sometimes Alan does his coaching or whatever it is. But again, we're in a different space and we have credibility, so it works differently. And we always do a live read. So what does that mean? Some people are nervous about their calls to action. Understandably so. Trust me, I understand. Because they're afraid to ask for stuff. So instead of doing a live read, they want to record it and then put it somewhere in the podcast. I like live reads, meaning I'm going to do it live, because you can talk about what you talked about on the episode, and then you can connect it to the call to action. And I think it's a really good opportunity to get outside of your comfort zone and work on something that might not be second nature yet. A recorded call to action would just be you sitting down like you're recording a podcast episode, but just recording your call to action. So it could just be, hey, it's Kevin checking in, and I just want you to know that if you're finding value in today's episode, we have a Facebook group that's all about this kind of thing. And we post in it every single day, and the ultimate goal is to help you blank, 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 blank. So click the link in the show notes if you're interested, and you can join. All right, back into today's episode. That might be a recorded one. Nothing wrong with it. It sounds really good. Awesome. You do it once, and you don't have to worry about it. You could put music to it, whatever. I like live reads because at the end of the episode, towards the end, you can say, if you're struggling with the problem that we talked about today, here is the solution. Now, obviously, it's different with solo episodes and guest episodes. All right, your call to action for your guest episode is almost always going to be for your guest. Makes sense. But there's no reason you can't put a call to action for your stuff as a mid-roll, right? You can always do that. So a mid-roll is usually recorded. I like the outro, like the pre-outro call to action, that's a live read. That's just the way I enjoy it. I didn't always enjoy it. It's taken me a long time to get to the place where I actually enjoy doing it because I don't feel like I'm being salesy. I don't feel like it's really, if you find value in this, you might find even more value in this. Cool. That's my frame now. But I like that live read. You do you. You do what you're most comfortable doing until it gets easy, and then I would say push the barrier a little bit and try something that's a little bit harder. I think live reads are really powerful. So that's just my 2 cents. Real quick, we'll touch on this because we touched on it, but I want to make sure we wrap it up with a bow. On YouTube, people tend to do like, subscribe, comment very early on the video. I'm not 100% sure where the psychology behind that is because I like to add value before I ask for anything. So you can try that if you want to try it. That's totally up to you. On the podcast, when I speak specifically about YouTube, I'm not saying there isn't crossover to the podcast. I'm just saying on YouTube, I notice that a lot with a lot of big content creators. Totally up to you. Try it out. The midtro, the mid-roll is usually recorded because it's really hard to do that in the middle of the episode. It just takes a lot of thought. And then the outro, your actual outro, your branded outro, which is recorded, right? It has your music. It goes on the end of every single episode. You can put calls to action in there, but I would suggest putting your least valuable calls to action because a lot of people aren't going to listen to the outro. So I just want to make sure I touch on that.
Hey Kevin, Kim here. Just wanted to send you a video to say thank you so much for your help on creating the Peaceful Productivity Podcast. You know, I couldn't have done it without you. I knew you'd be lots of great help with the technical aspects of getting the podcast going, but you went well above and beyond that. You helped me with the strategy and you gave me all kinds of really great support. You know, I think the key to success in business is a great attitude, and you have that in spades. You really walk the walk. So thanks again. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Here's another reason why calls to action don't work. Some calls to action. Because you're not creating a call to action that is directly connected to something that is measurable. So yeah, we want it to be highest probability, but it also has to be something that's very, very easy to measure. So one of the things I have been doing a lot on Next Level You is almost every episode I'm talking about subscribing. Almost every single episode, that's my call to action. Why? Because I can literally go into Apple Podcast Connect and I can go into Spotify and I can see, over the last week, we've had X amount of subscribers and followers. That means that people are actually doing this call to action. That's all that means. I like that. I think it's really good to have something that's measurable because then you can figure out, okay, well, when I say it this way, we get more. When I say it this way, we get less. So make sure it's measurable. Now, in theory, everything should be measurable, but if you're asking people to download your free course that you never check, you don't know if it's working. If you're asking people to follow you on social media, but you never check if you've gotten any new followers, doesn't matter. We don't know if it's working. Email list, same thing. So just an idea. And then last thing on this, give them a reason why to do it. So there is a book I don't think I have it in my office. There is a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. And Robert Cialdini is a psychologist, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But this book is all about influence and how to influence people to do stuff. And it's essentially a sales book. And I like it because it's not, I think it's aligned. There's a lot of sales books out there that are just utter garbage. And this one is not one of those. It's a really good tactical book, and it has a lot of aligned fundamentals. There is a study that has been done, and again, don't quote me on this. I want to give us the trend of the study, not the actual specifics. But ultimately, what it boiled down to is somebody would go to a copy machine in an office, and they would try to cut the line to make a copy. And they would do it, and they would just say, hey, can I cut to make a copy? Or, hey, can I get in front of you so I can make a copy? And there was a certain percentage of people that said yes. When the person said, hey, can I cut you in line? I need to make a copy. So let's just imagine I didn't say that in the first one. They didn't say I need to make a copy. They just said, hey, can I cut? They got a certain percentage. When they said, hey, can I cut you? I need to make a copy. It went up, let's just say by 40%. I don't know the exact stat. The thought and the theory behind this is when you give somebody a reason why, they are more likely to comply. Think of it this way. If you want somebody to put their seatbelt on, this is two different scenarios. Hey, put your seatbelt on because I want you to. Or, hey, put your seatbelt on because if we get into an accident, you're going to fly through the windshield and you might get hurt really badly or even worse. I'm going to listen to the second one. Probably not the first one. Because you're giving a real reason why. That's another thing about calls to action. Why should I join your Facebook group? Why should I join your 21-day challenge? Why should I join your email list? That's always an interesting one for me because you go on a website and they say, join my newsletter so you never miss anything. For me, that's not a big enough why. What am I missing? Am I missing deals and sales and offers? Am I missing exclusive opportunities that other people aren't going to get? What am I missing? So that's another important thing to connect is why is somebody actually doing the call to action and what are the benefits? Why should they do it? What are they going to get from it? And that's why I like to do it connected to the episode. And you'll hear me when I talk about podcast breakthrough sessions, the why is always if you're struggling with blank, not always, but if you're struggling with blank and you need help, book a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session. That's the why. The why is I'm going to help you solve your problems, hopefully. And if not, maybe I'll make you laugh once or twice. We'll find out. So creating and giving them the why is most likely going to help increase the conversion of your calls to action. But they got to be measurable. They got to be in the right place. Most likely, highest probability, not highest ROI. And maybe you're just not saying them enough. I don't know the stat on this. It's probably up to like 27, 28, but it's something along the lines of it takes the average person 27, 28, 30 touches before they make a purchasing decision. This morning, so I wear mouth tape when I sleep at night because I snore and it helps me sleep better. But my nose has been stuffed up and I wake up in the middle of the night and I got to take my mouth tape off and I haven't been sleeping well. So I ordered these new nose strips that open up your nostrils. The ones I was using before, I'm allergic to them. My nose breaks out and the skin peels off and it's this whole thing. And I've seen this ad dozens and dozens of times for this new nose strip that's magnetic and it's cool. Today, I went and found it and I bought it. And when I was doing the checkout, it said, where did you find us? And how long have you known about this product or service before you purchased it? The reason I think they're most likely asking that question is they're trying to figure out how many touches did it take before this person actually purchased. How many calls to action do we have to use? it's different depending on how many episodes you do. We do an episode every day. So theoretically, we get 14 calls to action a week. I do this podcast once a week. Theoretically, I get 1 call to action a week. So it's a little bit different. On Next Level You, I can get some data pretty quickly about what calls to action are working and which ones aren't. On this show, it takes more time, right? And this show is a smaller audience, so it's not apples to apples. But it could be the same for you. You could say, well, I've talked about the Facebook group every single day or every single episode this month. It's like, well, that's only 4 times. So maybe it just is going to take longer. It's okay. You could always try to have the call to action twice in the episode, where if you're talking about, let's say you're talking about community, you can drop it in, and friendly reminder, we have a Facebook group if you're looking for more community, and then you can do a more serious call to action at the end, and then you kind of get 2 opportunities. But that's a piece of it too. It just takes a certain amount of times before somebody makes a purchasing decision. And even if it's free, it's still a purchasing decision. It's still a new behavior. So don't beat yourself up if your calls to action aren't working. Maybe it hasn't been long enough yet. Maybe it's just you've only done it 3 times, and 3 times is not enough. I mean, how many calls to action we've done? Thousands and thousands and thousands at this point. This one I've done 100 and, what episode is it? 109. 109 times I have, I think, offered a podcast breakthrough session. So I'm just running it. And the other important piece of this is, and this will be the last thing, I half pinky promise. If your call to action is at the end or it's in every episode, it doesn't have to be at the end, and somebody goes back and binges your content, they're going to get a really good idea of what it is that you offer. So it's not just about this episode. It's about all the episodes prior. Every single one of the episodes that you produce becomes an opportunity. And if it has your call to action in it, that's valuable. Last thing, because this comes off of that. Another common question I get asked is, Buzzsprout and a lot of platforms have dynamic ads, I think is what they call them. Dynamic something, where you can record a pre-recorded thing and the host can put it in a certain part in the episode, but you can take it out later. So if you're doing a call to action for something that is in person on a certain date that you only do once a year, you could do that dynamic ad leading up to the event and then change it later. I like to do it the other way. I don't like the dynamic ad perspective because I want people to know what we do. I would rather that live in the podcast forever, because if somebody goes back and listens to that episode, they might think, oh, wow, I didn't realize these guys did an in-person mastermind. I wonder when the next one is. And then maybe they'll go check out the website. So the call to action, sometimes it's just to prime the mind, to remind people of what it is that you do. So that's just my 2 cents on that. It's worth testing to see. But I like just doing the call to action. I don't care if it's a once per year event. I want everybody to know all of the things that we offer. Now, we're playing the ultra long game, so maybe that's not the way you want to do it. Then you can always test out dynamic ads. I think it's dynamic ad insertion, I think is what it is on Buzzsprout. But totally up to you. But I like people to know what we're doing. So that's why I prefer the live read, and even if it's a specific thing, I just leave it in there. Okay. Call to action time. If you are struggling with your calls to action, or you just don't know what to use, you don't have the products or services or Facebook group or freebies or email list or whatever it is, and you need help and clarity with that, click the link for a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session where I will help you get clarity around that. 2 times in the last couple weeks, the feedback I got after a podcast breakthrough session was, wow, I am leaving here with way more clarity than I expected. I know exactly what to do. I know where to go next. And thank you so much for that. I'm not the wisest wizard. Sometimes I can see things that other people can't, or I can put things in a certain order just because I'm on the outside looking in. You know how it is. Sometimes it's easier to help other people with their problems than it is to help yourself with yours. just kind of the way it works. So, link will be in the show notes if you're interested, and click that button. Also, if you would subscribe, I would appreciate it very, very, very much. As you know, subscriptions are something that help the algorithm, and it shows the algorithm that you like this content and you want to get more of it, and it'll help put this podcast on the top charts. And I think it already is, but it'll help me get even closer to the top. It'll help us get even closer to the top, where we can help even more people with their podcasts. I hope this episode was valuable, because I understand this one was like very in the weeds and very specific and very tactical. I hope you feel more confident about talking about the stuff that you offer. Sales is not sleazy. Sales is helping, as long as you're doing it from an intentional place and in a kind-hearted place. So I hope your relationship with sales and business is shifting. And I hope you are getting opportunities that you've been working really, really hard for. And most importantly, I hope when you get those opportunities, you say yes. Until next week, keep on crushing it, keep on podcasting, and we will talk to you then.